Nicholas Cusa and his immediate associates, like Brunelleschi, for example, actually defined modern civilization. This was a qualitative leap with respect to most of the civilization before then, as a scientific civilization. Now, these developments continued under the impetus of modern European science. This reached a point actually in warfare. And people who were dealing with warfare and things which are synonymous or cognate to it were looking at the thing, don't fight the war of the past. Progress is occurring in technology and science and understanding and culture. So always, instead of going to war on the level of yesterday's experience, where your anger is built up, skip a step and go to a higher layer and define your action from a higher standpoint. It may be going to war at a higher standpoint. It may be avoiding war by going to some higher cultural standard for this. This has been the experience. For example, Riemann is particularly important because of certain features of his discoveries. They're unique. All right, so once you now define a Riemann order of physical space-time. It comes out of this process. This reaches a high point with the accomplishments of, for example, Einstein with his thing. All right. So now you had a blockage. It was built up. European civilization, under the influence of people like Bertrand Russell in particular, were determined to crush scientific progress. That was his mission. And so then we got into the point of we getting into a new war. So what had been discovered by Riemann, Einstein, and so forth was now put to work because it was there naturally. Once what Einstein had discovered as antimatter principle changed everything. No longer was space and time as we use them normally could be accepted anymore. And intelligence said, all right, if you're going to fight a war, you better think in terms of how you're going to contain this problem. Not try to how you can deal with it practically. Don't be practical. Practical people are dead people, or are likely to be soon dead. So always going from a higher standpoint, a higher level of technology. Now we think now in terms of going from nuclear processes, and nuclear functions existed before then, but nuclear processes in the sense of mankind using them in a concentrated way is new. And it developed out of this period in the process of the early part of the last century. Now you get into thermonuclear things. We're now looking at matter, antimatter capabilities as a level at which we're aiming. So you always go in strategy, in political strategy, military strategy, in other words, from a higher form of activity than you had known before. So don't go to war like a barbarian. If you have to go to conflict, always go from a higher level than you have done before. Don't go blindly into perpetual warfare. Look what's happened. How has society been destroyed? Like the United States and Europe, for example. How has it been destroyed? A simple policy. How long has nuclear power been available? How long has thermonuclear fusion been available as a technology? Now, we couldn't stop it, and when people had to overcome an opposition, they knew that they had to go to a higher form of this power, nuclear power and thermonuclear power. But the point is that and you don't have to go to war. You have to take a principle, it's a higher principle, and apply it to the situation, to the problem, which is what happened to the Russian command in this past week. You got a bunch of scared bunnies called Eastern Europeans. They're shitting all over the place. The sidewalks are not safe to walk upon under these conditions. And so the Russian attack has Russian response to the British scheme for using Obama to start a war ran into a problem. You have, the Polish and other nations which are in intermediate Eastern Europe between Western and Central Europe and the Russian system. They were weak, and they're scared shitless. because they know they're only the tools of other powers. So what the Russians do? The Russians did something which is, it may seem like bluff, but it was not a bluff. It was a bluff which was not a bluff. And the bluff was, Russia said, yeah. And they came out with a panoply of the Russian military command, which is deployed under the new president. And there are going to be a lot of changes under the new president. Because the defeat of the opposition by the new president means a change of the correlation of forces. And it starts what from? The intellectual level. Not the weapons level as such, it's the intellectual level. And if you want to understand what was done under Putin in this past week, you have to think about the intellectual level, not the practical level. It's practical, but it's not practical. There's a higher principle behind it. Now, what's happened? You can imagine where the Polish and other people are sitting today. I think they'll have difficulty in getting off that pot because they have just had a shot which tells them what their fate would be if they continue to go along with what the British and the United States are doing. I can show you that there are a lot of filled pots, and they're not filled with what you might say. Right? Now, but so therefore what happens is the intellectual process becomes superior in aspect to the mere physical process. The threat of death and all that stuff is there, but it doesn't work the same way as it would work otherwise. Once you pose the thing in terms of, you have declared war on us, which is what Russia said. You have declared war against us. You have declared thermonuclear war against us, because your game depends upon using U.S. bombs to these Ohio submarines and so forth, in order to conduct thermonuclear war. That's your intention. And that's what Russia said. That's your intention. Therefore, we will not wait for you to get to that point. We are now challenging you now, don't do it. We're forbidding you to do it. Now the warfare has now come to an intellectual level, because the threat of reality now becomes the influential shaping force. And also is true that Russia cannot wait. Because if this process were completed, the development of these territories were completed, then Russia would face an impossible situation. Not totally impossible, but relatively impossible. So therefore, Russia has to say no now. And Russia is saying, you have declared war against us. You in the United States have declared war against us. And we're going to act against your ability to launch that war. And for starters, we're going to scare the shit out of the Poles and other people who threaten to go along with it. Now, this is not a bluff. Don't assume it's a bluff. It's not a bluff. It's a real war. But what happens, the Russian operation here has gone to a higher level than simple warfare. It's gone to define the space in which this thing is being done. Now what have you got in Europe? Look at the factors of this. What's the condition of Europe? Greece. What's that? Spain. Portugal. Next, Italy. What about the fighting condition of these nations? Let's talk about the British. What's the actual fighting condition of the British population now? They're bankrupt. The Rothschild Empire is bankrupt, hopelessly bankrupt. So therefore, you're playing at all levels. You're not playing at warfare as a specific thing. You're playing at all levels. You're playing strategy at all levels. Not just warfare strategy, but the mind strategy, how the minds are controlled. And not controlled in the sense of arbitrary by tricks. It's real. There's no tricks involved what Russia did in the confrontation with the Polish and other forces against NATO. It's not a trick. It's real. But the psychological trick is not just a trick, it's reality. The disposition to act is a reality, even if the action has not taken place. And that's this way this thing functions. So what people talk about, strategy, all these guys, I mean, we have people as strategists in the U.S. military at higher ranks, and they're not stupid. They know what they're doing. But they have a nation which is stupid on their hands. And that's a reality too. Dempsey, for example, he's got a problem. He's got a stupid nation to deal with. And the stupidity of that nation is a military factor. It's a strategic factor. And this is the nature of things. You see when you this kind of example, like the example of Russia's action to deter Eastern Europe. Because, yes, you'll have the NATO command. It's got its ass all ready and puckered to go to war. But the Polish people and others are not quite that enthusiastic about that. And what has happened, a psychological thing has happened, which is defined, this is not merely psychological, this is real. They've been confronted with the evidence that what they were about to participate in is not a game that they can play. They're convinced now that if they play this game, they're likely to be exterminated. And that has an effect. You have still the idiots, like the Obama lovers, who are clinically insane, morally and otherwise. They still try ahead. But Europe has lost the nerve for what it was prepared to do before Russia intervened and said no, yet. So that you have to think about the levels, the controlling levels of processes, as I made a general description of this matter earlier. The same kind of thing operates this way. This is real strategy. It is not fake. It is not impressions. It is not scowling or mask games. Not that. It's all real, except that which is faked. That the forces in the mind are real. They're real forces. Creativity is a real force. Level of the functioning of the human mind is a real force. Force is not made of objects. It's made of what controls objects and is able to create them. Creative process. That's really what you're doing something. If you're doing using a weapon, a thing, to throw it at somebody, that's not real. That's not human. Anybody can fart. That is not really important. You have to understand, as I said in general, you have to look at the process which contains the process. And the ultimate process is the human mind, or similar forces in nature otherwise. These forces are real. They're acting forces. They affect the human mind. They affect other things. They affect all kinds of processes. And the totality of these interactions, which is reality. And today, people who read the press don't know what the hell they're talking about. It's inherent in their belief. And this is reality. And if we're going to deal with the kind of challenge that mankind faces, like this objects in space, defense of space, defense of Earth, that's a real thing. And the commitment to do that or not to do it is a very real thing. You don't have to get there that far to do it. It's real. If you don't do it, it's real. The denial of action is as real as action, because the denial of action is a form of action. That process is a process. And what very few people do in the United States today or otherwise, they don't understand the most essential thing about humanity. That humanity is a process of this type. And the case of warfare and what the Russians did on this case of the Polish border is simply a typification of what most people are too stupid to recognize as the thing that controls their fate.